Welcome, people of Earth, undersea cities, and various secret moon bases. It's the Smooth Thrills Radio Hour, Series 4, and I'm your host, Jason Rutledge. In this episode, we're taking a look at a movie from two of the smoothest thrillers of the last 100 years, director Otto Preminger and Frank Sinatra. It is, of course, The Man with the Golden Arm. It's a fun ride through jazz music, battling through addiction, and the fight against the production code that ruled Hollywood for way too long. It's probably the most socially important movie we've discussed since, I don't know, Better Off Dead maybe? We think you'll love it. We certainly had a great time making it. So, on with the show. But first, a quick message. You know, putting together a show like this can be a lot of work, everyone. But when it all seems too much, and I find myself wondering, just like Jennifer Love Hewitt, how do I deal? I just remember the pep talk my friend Louie gave me once.
Take me to court.
Please, Louie, you gotta make it stop.
I'll take care of you. Just work a few hours.
I gotta get some sleep. I gotta be fresh tomorrow.
You can work a few hours. Do us a favor. I'll guarantee you'll feel like a week in the country.
Please, Louie, please, now.
Drop dead.
Not worth it to him, I guess. I don't know.
Well, you remember how well it was when Anchor Bay funded these. They didn't sell a single DVD.
They had that gigantic booth. I think it was like 8 tables long with the giant Anchor Bay backdrop and everything. They were selling plushies of the Sharktopus or whatever it was, and I guess nobody bought anything.
You couldn't buy a DVD or a Blu-ray from them to save your life. It was all, here's, promotional stuff you can look at.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. Did Mondo have any cool exclusives?
Mondo wasn't
even there.
Oh, wow. Maybe I would have been okay financially then.
But
Anyway, shall we get started? We're starting this in 1915. The case of Mutual Film Corporation versus Industrial Commission of Ohio had just reached the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, Mutual Film Corp had argued that the Ohio Board of Censors, which reviewed and approved and actively censored all the films shown in the state, was stopping them from showing their movies, at least as intended in Ohio, violating their right to free speech. The Supreme Court, of course, ruled 9-0 against Mutual Film. Justice McKenna, writing for the majority of the court, said, I won't try to do an impression here, we'll just go with it. The exhibition of moving pictures is a business pure and simple, originated and conducted for profit, not to be regarded nor intended to be regarded by the Ohio Constitution, we think, as part of the press of the country or as organs of public opinion. Movies, he continued, may be used for evil. We cannot regard the censorship of movies as beyond the power of government. And with that, dear listeners, movies no longer had free speech protections under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. States could censor them however they pleased. This ruling started a battle between filmmakers and censors that went on for decades, with the filmmakers looking for clever workarounds of the rules and the censors continuously rewriting the guidelines of good and evil to impose their own sense of morality. One of the movies that was an absolute cannonball fired into the side of the good ship censor is the movie we're discussing in this episode, The Man with the Golden Arm. Hello again, welcome everyone to the Smooth Thrills Radio Hour. Nathan, Katie, what'd you think, Man with the Golden Arm? What kind of impression did it make on you? I know, Katie, this is probably the first time you've seen it. Mm-hmm. It's not one of those I revisit often, but it's worth doing. Nathan, I'm sure you've seen this one a few times.
Yeah, it's comfort food for me.
Where did you land on this one?
I can see why. It's definitely a good movie. I really liked it. It wasn't like, normally when you give me titles and I don't know what they are, I don't read on them. I just watch them because I feel like I can then give it a more surprised reaction to it, because this is not at all what I thought it was going to be. It also sounds like a Bond movie title, not going to lie.
It's pretty close.
The Man with the Golden Arm.
And she just watched Live and Let Die before it and was completely confused.
not at all what I was expecting, but I actually really, really enjoyed it.
Nice.
What were you expecting?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, with that title, I just kept thinking Bond movie. Like, and I know it wasn't a Bond movie, but with a title like that, it doesn't really, I don't know. I wasn't expecting a movie about an addict. I was not expecting slight mobster vibes. Like, it definitely wasn't at all.
There's mobsters. They're pretty low level, amateurish sort of mobsters, though.
Well, that's why I said vibe more than like, because it's definitely not a mob movie, but it has that feel to it.
Local hoodlums.
Well, this gives you a lot. This movie gives you a lot of things that were almost forbidden in the world of movies. You got lots of drinking, crime, gambling, and of course the drug use, which was definitely forbidden. The production code at the time, this would have been from, say, 46 to 51. The section of the production code states that illegal drug traffic must not be portrayed in such a way as to stimulate curiosity concerning the use of or traffic in such drugs. Nor shall scenes be approved which show the illegal use of drugs or their effect in detail, which Man with the Golden Arm definitely does.
It's just interesting to me how this film is like bending the rules on what can be shown in comparison to things we watch now, or even 10, 20 years ago. It's just interesting because honestly, it's not an overly graphic film with the depictions of drug use or anything like that, but it is quote unquote groundbreaking, for lack of a better term, because of where it is in film history, if that makes sense.
We should give a little bit of background if you're not familiar with how the production code worked and how it came to pass. You had 7 states that had state censorship boards. It was Chicago, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Maryland, Kansas, New York, and Virginia. Maryland didn't give theirs up until 1981, by the way.
Not surprised.
What Hollywood had to deal with was all of these different standards for what they could put into theaters. They had to make different cuts for every state, basically, depending on what the mood was at the time. So, around 1922, they recruited a guy named William Hayes to head what was going to be the all-new Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, the MPPDA, to defend the industry against attacks from the censors and try to calm things down and form an armistice, if you will. By 1930, the MPPDA, under William Hayes, who was a Presbyterian, by the way, agrees to abide by this thing called the Production Code, which was written by Martin Quigley, who is a Catholic, and Father Daniel Lord, who is a Jesuit. Those are the forces that came together to make this code. 1934, they established the Production Code Administration and put an Irish Catholic, very notable Irish Catholic named Joseph I. Breen in charge. This was a supposedly completely voluntary system wherein studios would submit scripts to the Production Code Administration. Breen would give his personal okay and a certificate of approval to every movie that was released. So effectively, this one guy was in charge of anything you saw. He was in charge of the Production Code Office, I think, almost until his death in 1965. But his authority was so total that in 1936, Liberty Magazine wrote an article about him saying that he, quote, had more influence in standardizing world thinking than Mussolini, Hitler, or Stalin. So, yay. But this was the guy you're up against, and this was the guy that Otto Preminger went up against when he made this movie. Preminger was a button pusher. He made it his mission in life to twerk off the censors and get his way and push this envelope wider and wider on what you could do. That's where we stand when Man with the Golden Arm comes out, and their rules about drug use in movies changed after this movie was released. Remember I said this code got updated whenever a successful movie would come out that flaunted the code. It would get updated to allow for this thing to happen that previously was a no-no.
Because it makes money.
You said 46. It was revised. Is that a result of Billy Wilder's The Lost Weekend?
Yes. Lost Weekend was easily, I think, one of the first big movies to tackle the subject of alcoholism straight on the way it did. It had a huge influence on revamping the code. really, the use of alcohol was never expressly forbidden. What they tried to say was you shouldn't put it in the movie unless you need to make a character work. So it's kind of a rule and kind of not a rule at the same time. But you definitely weren't supposed to depict it as something fun to do.
Enjoyable
Exactly.
or positive, yeah. Because the goal was to not ensure people to be doing it. That's so
and they must
weird.
have loved Laurel and Hardy with Blotto then.
Well, it makes sense
they
that
make their own fake liquor. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense with older films where your lushes are typically the people who are frowned upon and things like that. Like, knowing this code now makes sense for how certain things were portrayed and written and depicted, because they're not going. I mean, The Thinner Man, what year did that come out?
The Thin Man came out about 2 months before the Production Code Office was established in 1934.
Because if you look at his character, he is definitely a lush, but he was in a more positive light instead of maybe more negatively. Yeah. Definitely gives you something to think about when viewing films.
From the rule, according to the code, from, say, March 51 to December 56, which encompasses the period when Man with the Golden Arm came out, use of liquor in American life, when not required by the plot, will not be shown. So, it's just not a rule. They gave up. And the code was rewritten.
There's a lot of gray areas, too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
previously the code was drug traffic must never be presented, and then this movie comes out, and you got a shit ton of rewrites after that in 56, saying, okay, let's do it this way. Now, drug addiction must not be shown if the portrayal tends to encourage, stimulate, or justify the use of the drugs, stresses visually or by dialogue their temporary effects, suggests the drug habit may quickly or easily be broken, or shows details of drug procurement and the taking of drugs in any manner, or emphasizes the profits of drug traffic. So they kind of gave themselves a lot of wiggle room after that. It's like, okay, you can do it in a movie, but only if it doesn't do this. And that's what they had been doing with the code for decades, was someone would make a movie, people loved it, and they had to rewrite it. They had to rewrite the code to make room for that. And it just gradually just got taken down and taken down until the code didn't necessarily die.
Until you can pretty much show anything.
Oh yeah, the code didn't necessarily have a death date, like they didn't dig a hole in the ground and throw the papers in there and cover it up in some ceremony. It just became irrelevant. Just death by 1,000 cuts.
Well, when the rating system happened, did that kind of shift the balance on all of that other stuff?
The rating system was established in 1968 when Jack Valenti took over what was now called the MPAA and not the MPPD, whatever it was.
Yeah, but did that other stuff kind of go by the wayside once
it just died.
Ratings were...
The Production Code Administration Office closed.
Because it was irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right. Well, no, because he said that the one thing didn't go away in Maryland until 81.
That was the state board. That was the state censorship board, yeah. Didn't go away till then.
But,
so there were still some vestiges of this kind of censorship going on. It was just getting more and more difficult to enforce, and nobody was really paying attention to it as much. I mean, previously, if you were in Ohio and you showed a movie that was not code approved, you could go to jail as an exhibitor.
Well, I mean, if you look at... He didn't face jail time, but there were, in 2019, when The House That Jack Built came out, there was a one-night only event where they showed the unrated version of it, and a lot of theaters ended up having to pay heavy fines for that. So, I mean, it's still
a thing,
to an extent, goes on now.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to cite recent experiences, too, is like, when Adam Green had an exclusive deal with AMC to show the unrated version of Hatchet 2, that lasted half a weekend, I think, and they pulled it. And this was like AMC approving, and they're exhibiting this thing exclusively. But then they just backed out of it. Too much controversy. I guess they just don't want the heat.
Yeah. Well, because the heat's going to be bad publicity. That word almost didn't come out, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but I don't understand in that context why it matters, though, because...
Well, here's another example. It's not a movie theater thing, but when I used to work at Hot Topic in Maryland, we weren't allowed to put the Slipknot Halloween masks in the front window because the amount of people who would write to corporate about how it offended them.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow.
So, I mean, you're going to have that level of people who are going to bitch and...
Puritanical types.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they're the louder voices.
The Maryland Board of Censors was the last one to go away, and that was in 1981. Most everyone else gave up on it in the
Maryland is
1960s. Even Pennsylvania even stopped
That's why
in
when
61.
you said it was
yeah.
81, I was not surprised. Maryland.
I would have guessed Utah, but they never established a board. I don't know why they didn't.
Well, the interesting thing about the movie is that never at any point do they say what drug he's addicted to.
No, they
We all
don't, do they?
presume it may be heroin.
I assumed heroin because of the whole shooting up
That
process.
Which you could shoot up
Yeah.
morphine
Oh,
similarly, which is what is in the novel. But I don't think you go directly. I don't know. I'm no expert, but I don't think you go directly into a vein with morphine. I don't know.
Not that I've ever seen before, but I've also never done it, so I can't
So you could skirt that issue and just say that it's all merely implied that he's addicted to something. We don't know what it is. Doesn't seem to matter. The whole cold turkey sequence.
No, like in the end, it really doesn't matter.
And that
what it
went
is.
really quickly, and I feel like for heroin, it's not that quick of a turnaround.
No.
Because I just think of Train Spotting specifically.
Well, we presume he's all good by the end of it, but we don't know. That could have just been a momentary lapse.
He's never going to be good.
Experienced.
He's never going to be good because he breaks the first rule. He gets it clean. He gets out of jail and goes right back in with the same crowd. And these
right.
Well, and there is that whole thing in AA that once you're an addict, you're always an addict. You may be recovered from it, but you're still an addict because at any point you could fall off again.
And he's surrounded by parasitic types. I mean, aside from maybe the Kim Novak character, who he's parasitic toward, right? But yeah, there's no really redeemable characters in this, and you want to root for Frankie Machine, but he's putting himself in the situation.
Right. Certainly, Zosh is a hot mess.
I hate her. I did think her being able to stand was going to be more insidious than it was, which it's still pretty damn insidious. But I was thinking it was going to be more of her being in like cahoots with the quote unquote mob guys. But no, she just was desperate to keep him tethered. So
no, I'm just saying, like, for it's he essentially, that's Zosh is his cross to bear until, as the movie goes along, you learn, oh, she's just another monkey on his back is what it is. And then when you find the twist, she really has been exploiting him this entire time. And she actually, in a way, kind of reminded me of Shelley Winter's character in A Place in the Sun.
Oh, okay.
Where you have this negative home influence to Montgomery Clift's character. Like, she's just doom and gloom all the time, and he wants to live his life. And granted, this is a little bit different because he is married to her, and he is responsible for the car wreck that purportedly put her in this position. So it's a little bit different, but it just reminds me of, the fantasy element of him with Kim Novak and wanting to be a drummer and getting away from all of this.
Yeah.
He never will if he continues to go back home to Zosh.
There's a couple of things here. First, I thought it was really funny that Zosh keeps a scrapbook of fatal accidents, just like Hannibal Lecter keeps his scrapbook of church disasters. Implying possibly
Meanwhile,
that
she didn't die, so why is it fatal?
That Zosh may be a serial killer. I don't know. That could be.
her character was...
I also found it absolutely fascinating that Frankie thinks that joining a band is going to keep him away from drugs. Like, that just seems a little bit counterintuitive to me. Could be wrong.
Well, I think it was more the stability of a job that wasn't going to necessarily be toxic.
Wouldn't be dealing.
That's where the golden arm has three meanings. It's either the arm he shoots up with, the arm he drums with, or the arm he deals with.
Right. That's what's so great about that title. Yeah.
I was just sad it wasn't an actual golden arm.
They only directly refer to it as his golden arm when he's dealing poker. That's the only time they say it in the movie, but yeah.
Well, no, because doesn't he also mention it when he was talking about learning drumming in jail?
Maybe? I don't... Oh, he does.
Yeah, he does.
That's right.
They bring that up.
When he first gets out, he talks about how he took that time.
Stang about it, yeah. He says the guy that was training him says, I got a golden
Speaking
arm.
of Sparrow, he's probably the only character that isn't a complete parasite to Frankie. His heart's in the right place.
I thought it was funny that
Yeah.
when the guy wanted to hit him, he made him take his glasses off.
Yeah, that is a good moment.
Nobody in the movie ever really gets totally mad at Sparrow.
I like Sparrow, and I really liked Molly. Because for everything that Molly was, to an extent, being an enabler, she wasn't as bad as the majority of the other people in his life.
Right.
So,
and isn't it interesting? And I know time-wise it doesn't make any sense, but that her name is Molly.
Which is also a drug.
Coincidence, I think.
I mean, in a way, you could say that he's pining for the ecstasy of being with her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because when Zosh, or whatever she's called, is talking to her about how he's never going to be able to leave because as long as he thinks that I can't walk, then, or as long as I'm like this, he's going to always be here. Knowing full well he doesn't want to be, and that the two of them have whatever they have going on. I'm sure she thinks it's more physical maybe than it actually is, or what we're shown. I don't know how in depth it goes into the book. But
I actually haven't read the book.
I don't know.
For once, I didn't read the book on this one. I think it has a much bleaker ending than the movie does.
Oh, I do love Bleak. It's so funny because I'm familiar with this cover. I had seen this cover before.
Saul Bass.
Realizing what it was, because I think it's on Criterion.
So yeah, Saul Bass was associated with Preminger quite a bit. Also with Hitchcock. So if you're familiar with the openings credits to
North
Psycho,
by Northwest, I think he did also.
Yep, that was the best
I
one,
think so.
probably. Yeah.
Was Saul Bass on The Moon is Blue? I don't know.
I don't know. That was a couple years before that.
Yeah. Moon is Blue.
Obviously, Anatomy of a Murder years later, and of course, Skid
Bunny
Row.
Lake is Missing, one of my personal favorites.
I'm kidding.
Golden Arm is not on Criterion, but I can definitely, because it has the two covers for The Man with the Golden Arm and Anatomy of a Murder next to each other, and you can definitely see the similarities there.
Yeah, Anatomy is a Criterion.
Yeah, I knew that one was.
Yeah.
By the way, Preminger's movie The Moon is Blue was the first Hollywood motion picture to use the word virgin, believe it or not. And this was...
And what year was it?
1951 or something like that. 53?
I think it was like 53, yeah. And that's the one that he shot simultaneously in German and English with different casts on the same sets.
How in the hell do you pull something like that off? Ooh.
Well, they did that with... I mean, they used to do that back in the 30s where they would do Spanish versions. Like, you know, the Spanish version of Dracula was shot on the same sets.
Oh, that's right.
As the Todd Browning film. But also Laurel and Hardy did a lot of short subjects in Spanish, and they phonetically did their performances, and it's very strange, but it was a thing.
What if, when they do, you know how when you watch an Italian film and you have the really bad dubs and you can't always tell which language they're filmed in specifically, are there double recordings of those, or is it just a shitty dub?
Well, the dub itself is what you're asking?
Well, no, because
there could be
like,
multiple dubs of something, yes.
Well, I'm talking about, like, you can either watch it in Italian or you can watch it in English, but you can't really tell what it was originally done in because the mouths don't line up with either.
Right.
Are they filmed both ways, or is it just...
Well, a lot of the Italian films are shot without sound for the sake of dubbing it internationally.
They won't even bother.
And then also...
They won't even bother.
A lot of those... Yeah, a lot of those, because that's the thing, when they're setting up shots, they're talking nonstop. They don't care if there's action being shot.
They may be building a set right
nonstop
next to you at the same time that they're shooting something, so that I'm going to bother recording sound.
It's just interesting because, like, now that makes sense as to why the mouth doesn't line up with either the Italian or the English.
Yeah, a lot of those productions are, you know, you have international casts where your lead may be an American.
Right.
Or British, and everybody else is co-financing a lot of Spanish and Italian productions, a lot of Spanish and German productions. So you may have just a mix of the crews and the actual cast.
Incidentally, speaking of international productions, The production code also had rules that applied to movies that would be exhibited in other countries, not just the United States. There were certain words that were prohibited from being used because it might offend a foreign audience. Like from 39 till about the mid-40s, you could not use the word bum, bloody, sissy, gigolo, punk, sex appeal, sex life, shag, or shyster if you intended to show your film in England.
But we still have that now with our big blockbusters.
You could not use several, let's call them racial slurs, which is more or less understandable, but I'll skip that part. You could.
You're not gonna read the list?
From 40s through 1956, you were prohibited from using the phrases alley cat, broad, chippy, cripes, fanny, fairy, finger.
Cripes.
Yeah. I couldn't figure that one
Fanny
out.
finger?
As in the finger.
Fanny,
couldn't do that.
Oh, did you say fanny?
Could not say pansy, slut,
Fanny
SOB,
means
son of a
vagina
tart, do only
and
toilet
some-
gags, tomcat. Could not do it. They specifically forbid any traveling salesman and farmer's daughter jokes. The list is just incredibly weird. And of course was changing year by year.
But that still goes on today to some extent. Like when Left 4 Dead 2 came out for PC and Xbox, the cover was a zombie hand like this, and with the 2, and it had to be changed for Australia because it was not deemed acceptable.
Some of that has
there.
to do with the levels of violence also and what kind of certificates you're going to get.
I think Winnie the Pooh, also the Winnie the Pooh poster couldn't be displayed in China because he doesn't have pants on or something like that. It was some weird controversy.
Pants that poo.
Pants that
Poo.
That's a movie right there. On top of all
It
of
just makes me
this,
laugh.
guys like Preminger and the Hollywood system and all of America was held hostage. Well, let's say I'll start again. Guys like Preminger were also subject to the National League of Decency, also known as the Catholic Legion of Decency, which is founded in 1934. It wasn't really a censorship board in any way, but they had their own separate rating systems to let all the good Catholics know what movies they could watch and which ones they shouldn't watch. It was like an ABC rating system. A being perfectly acceptable on down to C, which was forbidden. The bonkers nature of this rating system meant that The Exorcist got an A rating as perfectly acceptable, but something like Man with a Golden Arm would get the forbidden rating for being completely unacceptable. If that makes any sense.
Well, The Exorcist doesn't have drugs in it.
I suppose.
saying.
She does go to the doctor.
Yeah, there are doctors.
There may have been drugs.
But that's why it's so weird. Like, I look at specifically Americans' views on things where we will throw extreme violence in everything. The news, anything and everything, but sex is like so taboo. And it's like, your child can be exposed to the weirdest shit, but don't ever mention like nudity or sex or anything. And it's just odd how things are perceived here versus other areas
Those
as
are
well.
probably the only two things they didn't do in Man with a Golden Arm was the sex and violence, although they did have the fight that occurs after the poker game is exposed for being a fraud. That's as close as it got.
Yeah. Well, they're skirting a lot of that probably to get away with
the rest of
the
it,
main
yeah.
story. You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
They're
you really
taking-
could go.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he could have brutally been beaten after that particular game in question, and and then also Darren McGavin's demise. Spoiler alert. That could have been in greater detail.
Same with her falling out of the window.
Yeah.
I think they probably pick and chose where to keep things so they could keep certain story points instead of making things more gratuitous visually, because they knew that they were bending.
But they didn't really need to go into depth on that either. But I feel
not
like
at all.
with McGavin's demise, it felt like that was a little too rushed,
It did.
because when I was rewatching it, you feel like you almost forget about it at some point, when it should really be this looming issue, because they are looking for Frankie. They think he's the one that may have done it. You know, he had the scuffle with him in the apartment earlier. But yeah, you kind of forget that Eleanor Parker's character was responsible for it briefly. Would have been better to see more of that, other than the point when he tells her that they don't think it was him that did it. I didn't do it. And she goes, well, who do they think it was? Like she's trying to see if she's
starts
a suspect,
clutching the whistle.
Yeah, that was great. The fact that she had that whistle the whole time and she's walking around and you've been found out.
The look on her face when he charges through that door is
so many good
priceless.
Performances in this movie. Darren McGavin was great in this movie. Of course, I don't think I've ever seen anything bad that he ever did. He's just great all the time. But oh my God, he's so threatening.
Yeah.
So just immediately threatening. You don't even have to know who he is. You just take one look at him in this movie, that's our bad guy.
Well, he's taunting that local alcoholic in that opening sequence. He's a jerk, But he's also very charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
And at moments you think he could be Frankie's friend.
Mm-hmm.
When he's trying to tell his boss, hey, back off of him, all right? You had him during his good years, and, and it's all a charade, really, but it's a nice little moment.
Was it immediately obvious to both of you that what a bad idea it was for Frankie to come back? Because he immediately falls in with all the same people he knew while he was an addict. Everybody he talks to knows exactly what he's just been through. It's like he's putting himself right back in that same environment. It's inevitable.
Right, that's why you can't truly root for him, because he came from that and he's going right back. Yeah. Which happens all the time.
But also, too, I love when people are like, well, just get out of that toxic environment. And it's like, but not everybody has somewhere new they can just up and move to. It's like he had no other options but to go back to this, because he spent 6 months in jail. So he clearly isn't going to have probably the money or anything to just leave.
Yeah.
I'm sure it would have been nice to just get out if he could have.
It's an important point in the movie. The fact that this had to be one of the first movies to even bring this up is kind of sad. But you have this atmosphere that was pervasive from the beginning of the Code on, where, and Katie, maybe you remember this term, glorification. Mm-hmm. To simply mention something is to glorify it. This was huge. And if you're in the Bible Belt, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. Why are you glorifying that? And it's like, I'm not.
They had the same problem with Lost Weekend. We can't even talk about alcoholism and how to deal with it, because to speak the word is to manifest it and give it glory, which is ridiculous. But this was the idea, and it hangs on even now.
Yeah.
Or no, we have to show this movie. We have to make this movie if we're ever going to have an honest discussion about the very real problem of veterans coming back from World War II addicted to things you've probably never even heard of. We're never going to be able to handle that unless we have this discussion. That's what Man with the Golden Arm was.
Yeah.
I think in the book they mention he's a veteran. They don't say it in the movie. I believe in the book he's
No, I don't remember.
I don't remember if he's I think in the book he's a World War II veteran.
Well, the book, that would make sense. The book was published in 1949.
Yeah.
There was something that was interesting, and I don't know the state of this patient or not, but in prepping for this, Sinatra was given access to, I believe it was a psychiatric ward or something to that effect, where he got to witness an addict going cold turkey in a padded cell.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
In preparation for his performance, obviously. And he said it was one of the most revolting scenarios ever, and he had to turn away. He couldn't continue to watch it because it was almost inconceivable that another human being could be going through this. That's where he got his motivation for that scene, of course.
Yeah.
Can we talk about what a wild turn this was for Sinatra? He was supposedly, his career was over and done with by 1952 or so. His whole style of singing had gone out of favor because Elvis had come around, and all the papers said, well, it was a nice ride, Frankie, but it's over. He set up shop in Vegas. And then 1953, he's back. His movie career goes into total blast-off mode after that.
Well, the films he had done in the 40s and early 50s, they're fun, but they're not they
were song and dance movies.
No, they're not acting spectacles like From Here to Eternity or this, which to me is my favorite of his performances. That's my favorite Preminger film as well, I think. I mean, this 1955 was a big year for him. Not only was there this, there was the film version of Guys and Dolls, where, by all accounts, he shouldn't have been Nathan Detroit. He should have been Sky Masterson, which is that was the character he wanted to do. But of course, they were insistent on Brando doing it. And Sinatra had already been doing the number Luck Be a Lady in his live show for years up to that point. And he's the pinnacle version of that song, by the way. It's ironic that he doesn't perform it in the film. And you've got Brando's, we'll call it, interpretation of singing as a not as suitable as a replacement. But yeah, this year, and he also did The Tender Trap the same year, which is more in league with his other type films. He was totally committed. This reminded me when I was watching it, I used to work with this guy like 20 years ago, and we would talk about older films and whatnot. And he was not a fan of Sinatra as an actor because he felt that he didn't earn his place. You know, there's always rumors that he had mob ties and all that, and maybe he got forced into it, which is bullshit. He wasn't forced into the industry. No. I mean, that was a thing that they would do with like singers and later, of course, Elvis or anything. They just put them in the spotlight because they were the thing.
Because they'll sell too. I think we talked about this on the car wash episode.
Yeah.
When you can use musicians to push sales.
Right. But there's no better proof, and I would always argue this with him, because he was in his, probably, I want to say, late 60s, so he had a different perception of it. But I would always argue The Man with the Golden Arm. If you want to see Sinatra earn his place in movie history, look no further. I mean, he won the Oscar for
Here to Eternity.
From Here to Eternity, but this is all in. And also with Guys and Dolls, I mean, he criticized Brando's performance because it was interesting how he was more in tune with doing the film than Brando was, who was an actor, and that's all he was. But that's how committed he was.
He was definitely taking a chance with his career to make this movie. This was against his image.
Well, you said that his career had kind of come to a standstill. How did you word it?
It was declared dead.
So maybe it was easier for him to do a role like this because he knew he didn't have anything necessarily on the line.
Nothing left to lose.
Maybe.
He could have just slummed it around in Vegas. No, I want to say slumming around in Vegas. He could have just done that for the rest of his career and probably been just fine.
But it's admirable that he was as committed to work in film.
Yeah, this shows that.
Yeah, leading up to films like Manchurian Candidate, and just really important cinema that he was always a part of. And this is interesting to look back on this. And, some people may only know him for his musical career. And you couldn't have had two more perfect parallel careers, if you think about it, than what Sinatra went through.
Oh, and in case any listeners are not familiar with Marlon Brando, he is not known for his musical career.
No.
Not to speak of.
No.
There are reasons. Now, Man with a Golden Arm was certainly not the first, second, or last gunshot fired at film censorship and the production code. And it wasn't the last, but it was one of the ones that definitely was pushing it into its grave. Really, the big one would have been a foreign film, L'Amour, February 1951. The New York State Board of Regents had declared that this Italian movie called L'Amour was sacrilegious and forbid it to be screened by the state. Now, this movie was distributed by Joseph Burston Incorporated in the U.S., and it's an anthology movie, part of which is called The Miracle. Now, this part involves a guy named Saint Joseph who impregnates a woman called Nanni, who then believes herself to be the Virgin Mary, is directed by Roberto Rossellini and stars no less than Federico Fellini himself. Burston argued that the injunction was not only a violation of their free speech, but because they had declared it sacrilegious, this is where they screwed up, it was also a violation of free exercise of religion. This got appealed all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1952. The court agreed with Burston and said that, yeah, you're right. And with that, movies had First Amendment protections again under the U.S. Constitution. and the state censorship boards were starting to crumble. It took them a while, but a lot of them shut down within the next 10 years, except for Maryland.
God damn it,
So
Maryland.
they were under continuous pressure to outdo TV and compete against foreign films which were exempt from the code. You can thank Mr. Roger Corman for importing a whole bunch of those into the U.S. and making this happen.
Thanks, Raj.
They just could not keep this code relevant anymore, and eventually it just died. And like I said, Man with the Golden Arm was a big part of that. And it led to larger conversations, we think, about, drug addiction that may not have happened otherwise. I don't know how long it would have taken for somebody to make a movie like this had Preminger not done it.
Yeah, because when I always compare it to The Long Weekend, which was 10 years previous, and I think it tackles it as strongly as Man with the Golden Arm does, but for alcoholism,
Should I put that one on my
Definitely.
list?
It's a must-see for sure.
Well,
Absolutely.
I really like, this is going to sound weird and I really don't have any other way to say it, but I like movies that tackle addiction because, I love Requiem for a Dream. I love Train Spotting, Enter the Void. I like those films that show the lowest possible low and hopefully getting a chance to come back from that. I like those types of films. So that's why I was really surprised to see that this did tackle addiction and all.
They could have gone further.
If you want to see the grandparents of that type of subgenre, then yes, definitely.
Incidentally, on another historical footnote, we mentioned earlier the Mutual Film Corporation that started this whole thing back in 1915. They produced a whole bunch of Charlie Chaplin movies until 1916, and then Chaplin left to form United Artists with Mary Pickford, D.W. Griffith, and Fairbanks, which is the company that released Man with the Golden Arm.
Yeah. They were risk takers as a company always. If you look at some of the more...
Oh, it's in their DNA, yeah.
Yeah. They would pick up and they weren't like United Artists Productions necessarily. They were they would pick up films for distribution. I don't think this film was a seeded production at UA.
No, they took it.
And they no longer retain the rights to it.
They championed it and got it into theaters. Yep. The only thing Preminger had to say, I think, was you have to keep the Saul Bass poster. If you don't keep his poster, I won't let you distribute this movie.
Yeah.
But it shows where his loyalties lie. Right. I still don't know I don't know the trajectory of his career. So I don't know by him doing the poster for this film if it was early on in his career or if it was midpoint. By him saying, we have to keep this poster, it could have been what projected him forward. Because if this
I don't know what the timeline was on Saul Bass at this point.
He was established for certain, but I think I may be wrong, but he may have been associated with Preminger prior to Hitchcock, but I'm not certain.
I'm not either.
Okay.
But, he was also, he had other things going on too. It wasn't just title design sequences in films or poster designs or anything like that. He directed sequences in films as well.
And then Phase 4.
Yes. The famed Phase 4, which if you like ants, that's your movie. It's crazy though, because you watch that movie and you go, what? To come from that same person, it's just such a left turn that you wouldn't expect. But it's a great movie unto itself. It's totally different than anything else. Also, can we talk about when you mentioned it? You teased it on one of the Instagram lives, and I guessed what, because you weren't going to release what titles you've been thinking of for this season.
Yeah.
But I kind of guessed accidentally this was one of the movies.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what it was that you said, but I was like,
I think all I
and you were like,
I think all I said was Preminger. I'm pretty sure I made that may be the only word I dropped, and this was the first thing that came to mind. You didn't go with Exodus or Carmen Jones. You went straight. It must be that.
That's what I was thinking. Carmen Jones. Advise and consent is what I was thinking. Yeah.
The music in this was phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
So okay, Katie. I don't know if you're.
I'm not going to know anything.
Well, you might be familiar. I know you're familiar with Elmer Bernstein because he scored one of your all-time favorite films in 1981.
I have a favorite film.
In fact, we've covered it on an episode.
Oh,
don't look it up.
Oh. Also, I need to know if that soundtrack is on vinyl because, like
the
you
movie
said,
that you're thinking about, if that soundtrack is available.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not officially available.
Damn.
If that's
I
the
do love
movie
that
you're
movie
thinking
so
of that I
much.
know.
Well, if we covered it on episode 1, I clearly know it's Wolfen. No, I'm just kidding.
Which is, ironically, that is one of her favorites.
Hey.
So the person who did the score for Man with the Golden Arm also did American Werewolf in London?
Yep. He also did Ghostbusters.
Ray Parker Jr.
He also did the
score
Magnificent Seven. I mean, that's what's so crazy. He told Preminger his idea, and he goes, because he knew Preminger may not be on board with this. He's like, since Frankie wants to become a drummer, he wants to live in that jazz lifestyle. That's what I envisioned the score to be. And he was like, thinking he's
What
going to
else
be
makes
like,
sense?
get out of here. That's not where...
Nothing else makes sense.
Yeah. But that's what it is. It's the fantasy element. And it carries the whole film because that's like almost... That's what he aspires to live, that lifestyle. So it totally works. And it's probably one of the most brilliant film scores ever. And it's completely underrated.
Oh, it's phenomenal. That was like one of the
film
first
scores
things
he knows of. Yeah, I mean, where he's known by, that one always gets forgotten, it seems. And
so has Man with the Golden Arm had an official big time release? I think you said it was on Criterion.
It's not. I thought it was, but
no.
It's not.
The most official version is Warner Home Video.
Yeah, there's a Blu-ray of it.
So there's an import Blu-ray. I think it's Network that puts it out. But the film is weird. Like it fell into the public domain for the longest time.
The reason I ask, the reason I'm asking is because of the Manchurian Candidate, because that thing, I believe, was owned by Sinatra's estate, and he just didn't ever re-release it. Like, it was on TV one time in like 1968 or something, and then he just left it in a vault and wouldn't do anything with it. Well, people would ask him about it, and Sinatra would be like, I just forgot. Like, okay. It wasn't until after he died, I think, that it got an actual home video release, or somebody talked
it. It had been out on VHS in the late 80s, I believe. But yeah, it was one that sat around for a while, and it became like, and then when it re-released, I believe it was given a PG-13 as a rating. Like, it actually was in theaters again.
Oh, wow.
Kind of like The Birds in the 80s, where that was granted a PG-13.
Granted.
It never was rated before, But yeah, this particular film, because it was United Artists, they didn't own it. They just distributed it theatrically. The rights have always been weird. And then I think it was like late 80s, it was Preminger's estate basically honed in on the rights. And there's still like illegitimate copies out there, floating around, even on DVD.
I think I have one of them.
Yeah. But it wasn't until mid 90s, I believe it was 1994, when Warner Home Video released it on VHS. And that was the best print available. And their version has been released, I think, 10 years later on DVD. And it's still the go-to version.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure mine is a bootleg. It has a watermark in one corner, and all of the sound is on the right stereo channel only. So,
Okay. It might be. Well, this is the Warner release that was a part of like one of 3 Sinatra box sets that they put out back in like 2005. And then this is good. It's only got the trailer on there and a little making of featurette. But I also have the one by Sinatra's estate, the 50th anniversary. That's got some cool little interviews, and it's got a film historian commentary track that's pretty interesting. But I also have a Catcom version, which is abysmal. But I love Catcom.
You don't have the Viewmaster?
No, they didn't do it. That would be cool to see this in 3D, though.
We need to get on that and put out our own bootleg Viewmaster editions of some of these movies.
Yeah.
Give Nathan a do-it-yourself thing. The thing is it would sell.
Oh,
I know
Sinatra
people
up.
do it.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Seriously, I made all those fantasy covers of Viewmasters on my blog years ago.
I know.
And they were always Viewmaster reels that were never made. But, Blackie Manuel, come on. I want that.
Criterion still has not accepted the cover I made for them for Gone with the Pope, by the way.
No, it's their loss. I wouldn't be surprised if they pick this movie up at some point, if Warner doesn't do something with it. And they may license it out to somebody like
should.
them.
Why don't you do it, Nathan?
Interesting. I don't know enough tidbits on it. I just have an overall love for it, and I was telling him earlier that it's kind of like comfort food. Like I could just have this on in the background, because this is a movie you could just listen to this movie and it's amazing.
Oh yeah.
Like, you know, and I feel the same way toward Lost Weekend. That's comfort food. It's like, yeah, it's seeing Ray Milland
stumbling down the sidewalk with
fits over alcohol.
Got his typewriter under his arm, looking for a pawn shop that'll take it from him so he can buy just one more bottle. Oh, it's so sad.
I don't know. I just maybe something absurd about me, but I just didn't. I don't know. I just feel these are like feel good movies when they shouldn't be.
I mean, Lost Weekend. Between these two,
I get it. I mean,
Man with a Golden Arm and Lost Weekend. Lost Weekend's the only one that had scenes from it cut into Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid.
I think it's interesting what we sometimes pick as comfort films, because it's like sometimes they really shouldn't be at all. Because like one of my go-tos is Funny Games.
That's an odd pick.
Or Clockwork Orange.
That's
which should not be comfort films, but
Clockwork tonally, I can totally get that.
How?
Well, it's a beautiful film.
And it is, yeah.
And the sound design and the score and everything. Wendy Carlos's score is amazing. And plus you get this rousing rendition of Singing in the Rain.
I love that movie.
Only almost as good as Gene Kelly's version.
It's a close second.
So
Marlon Brando's version would be third.
I totally get that. Did he do it? No, he did not do it.
It was Brando's version was cut from Apocalypse Now when the rain comes at the end, and
I bet, but there is one thing I wanted to. You mentioned Brando again. The opening sequence of this film, Man with a Golden Arm, reminds me of the set design of Guys and Dolls, like how it very much feels like a set,
definitely,
a soundstage. But this is like the rundown, and it's in black and white. It's kind of the dirty, grimy version, but you see like all the shops and everything, and it kind of reminds me of
it's
Guys
that
and
fantastic continuous crane shot from when we follow the bus up to where it parks and Frankie gets out, and then we follow him down the sidewalk for the longest time. Preminger loved to move the camera around. You see this in all of his movies. He's just masterful at it.
And when I saw Eleanor Parker listed in the credits, I expected she would be the bus driver, actually, in that scene. Because when they go to park, Parker. Anyway,
So any final thoughts on Man with a Golden Arm? It's definitely worth checking out if you have any interest in film history. If you have any interest in Preminger, Frank Sinatra, Arnold Stang.
Absolutely. If you love Hercules Goes to New York, I think you should check out some of Stang's earlier works, like this film.
Or if you remember his voice from Courage the Cowardly Dog and want to go back and check out
Hello, Courage the Cowardly Dog. As I was watching it, I definitely went, I can't wait to know how or why this was chosen. And I have absolutely loved the conversation surrounding this. Because just randomly watching it, you don't know about why it was impactful or why it was important. And
we don't think about it now because
it makes it even a better film.
We're used to seeing movies just go to all these places in a way that they just could not do then, unless you were a Preminger who just did not care what anybody else thought. This is what I'm doing.
That's why I think a movie like this I still think it's underrated. And maybe that has to do with the distribution element. Like if it had always been a studio picture, it'd be out there prominently. But it's like this nugget that people discover. And in whether it's a Preminger nugget or Sinatra or even Elmer Bernstein's score is unappreciated, I think, or underappreciated. Yeah, it's amazing. And this is like early Novak as well. Kim Novak later would do Vertigo, another Saul Bass poster design there and title sequence, by the way. And she's amazing in that. But this is like I could totally see where he would fall for her in this film. Like she's that thing you aspire to, right? I mean, aside from his career that he wants that perfect life. And I think maybe deep down, she might be the reason he goes back home. Like if he can make life with her, he can have his dreams, but ultimately
it wasn't going to happen.
Although they are, you know, walking off in the sunset in a sense at the end, but
Nathan, he's taken it all with him.
At cause of some,
because the monkey never dies. The monkey never dies, and you know
the
it.
The monkey's never dead, dealer. The monkey never dies.
And with that,
one of the best lines.
Draw this to a close. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you for listening to yet another exciting episode. The Smooth Thrills Radio Hour is a production of Ghostcraft and is recorded live in Dallas, Texas. Please email your questions and comments to autopilot@smooththrillsradiohour.com or drop us a message on Instagram. Enjoy the rest of your day.
This has been a Ghostcraft presentation.